Secretary of States of every state and the attorney generals the ability to sue immigration officers and sue local authorities if they do release a predator out into the community and they do cause harm.
Yeah, so as there cities across the U.S. right now, they're really cracking down on criminal illegal immigrants. We're seeing a wave of arrests as ICE conducts raids to track them down. Up to 10,000 troops are expected to descend along the southern border in San Diego, marking one of the largest deportations in U.S. history. Some law enforcement officials throughout the country, though, especially in Chicago, are refusing to comply with President Trump's orders. They're neglecting to help ICE with their deportation efforts. So despite this pushback, it does seem like Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, they're already making strides in the first couple of weeks. How do you think that they are handling the deportation so far?
Well, they're going after people that are already in the system, and we knew they were in the system because they committed heinous crimes. They committed domestic violence, child molestation, child rape. So they were released under the Biden administration. They went back into immigrant communities to reoffend. So now under the Trump administration, that catch and release policy is now over. Now they're going after people who are not only just deportable, but also had committed a criminal act or had been received a conviction. So there's two main areas of people who are now deportable, and that's what we're seeing. Huge amounts of ICE activity from San Diego all the way to the East Coast. But what we're not seeing are these mass raids and this hysteria that a lot of people are reacting to, that Latinos in general are being rounded up for being brown or being Latino. That's not what's happening. Again, Tom Homan has repeated these are targeted raids for criminal undocumented immigrants.
Esther, a federal judge has blocked President Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship, which is set to go into effect in just a matter of weeks. Do you think the Supreme Court will side with Trump and uphold the constitutionality of the order?
It really depends on what the public outlook is. The Supreme Court justices, they take a look at public opinion, and they are going to basically have to interpret what it means to be a U.S. citizen based on the 14th Amendment that was originally drafted for the descendants of slaves that had been freed under the Emancipation Proclamation. What the 14th Amendment says is that you are a U.S. citizen if you're naturalized or if you're born in the United States and you're subject to the territory thereof. The question for the Supreme Court is a person who entered here unlawfully and jumped the fence like we're seeing right now, are they subject to the authority? Were they ever legally admitted and inspected? The answer usually is no. They continue to be citizens of their country of origin, and so are their children. And that's what the Trump administration's fighting. Give us an interpretation either for birthright citizenship as that will end, or whether they are in fact subject to the jurisdiction thereof and they're lawfully present in the United States. We knew all along these litigation was going to happen. We knew that it was going to end up in the Supreme Court. And that's what the Supreme Court has to decide. Whether they have the political wherewithal and courage to do so, we're yet to see.
That's a really interesting point there, Esther. Do you have any insight into public opinion on, first of all, this birthright citizenship order, but also the mass deportations, everything that Trump is doing for immigration reform? When I look at the poll numbers, it seems like, they're very supportive of this. The American people are very supportive. But what insight are you getting?
Well, I am an immigration attorney, and what I see is that Americans have always supported legal immigration. What they do not support is mass immigration, mass caravans of lawlessness that we saw under the Biden administration, where 8 million people were apprehended. So most Americans understand that this is not 1867, where birthright citizenship is gained just by touching foot here in America. What we're seeing is Americans want to end a lot of people who come from China just to give birth, have a U.S. citizen, take the child back that has allegiance and traditions to another nation, not America. What we want as Americans is for our traditions and our values to continue. And the best way to do that is with people who do have allegiance and who are subject to our laws, our authority, our culture and traditions. So that's basically what's going to take place here shortly, but that's the intention of what the Supreme Court's going to do that has never been interpreted before through the 14th Amendment language.
Esther, speaking of which, the Supreme Court in its current composition, have any of the justices given any sort of indication on where they stand? Would this be something likely that would go straight down Republican Democrat lines in terms of who appointed them, or could it be swung entirely a different way that we have not seen yet?
My hope is that it's not political. What we do want is a conservative interpretation of what the text says. And usually, conservative judges tend to stick to the original intent. What was the original intent of the drafters when they drafted the 14th Amendment? Oh, well, we have their writings. What did the writings say? Well, they were worried about the descendants of the slaves that had been freed in 1863, that slaveholders in the South would then enslave their children and their children's children. So they decided to draft the 14th Amendment saying that you were a citizen if you were born in the United States, if you were naturalized in the United States, and you were subject to these laws. They never intended a lot of the birth tourism that we see in Miami and San Francisco from all areas of the United States, people flying in from even our enemy countries having US born children so that they can later have chain migration. That was not the intent. So that's basically what the judges are going to do. The conservative ones are going to stick to the original language of the law, the original intent with the original interpretation, and the liberal judges are going to expand. They have a notion of that the Constitution is a living document, and that gives them any kind of interpretation that they want. That's convenient to them politically.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely overdue for us to be taking a closer look at our laws that we have on the books in regards to immigration. I want to keep in mind, what we saw over the past 4 years under the Biden administration. Do you think that he should be held accountable, or anyone in that administration should be held accountable at all for basically letting us have open borders? I mean, they welcomed the invasion that we saw while they were in power. Where's the accountability?
I think the main source of accountability and the first source of investigation has to land with DHS Alejandro Mayorkas as the director. He knew the law. He knew that he wanted to flout the law, whether or not it was intentional, knowing, willful flouting of the law. We don't know, but we do see the disastrous results of the policies. And where he didn't detain, there was no mandatory detention for people like Laken Riley's killer that were released into sanctuary cities to then reoffend and ultimately kill his victim. That's what we want to stop. When the law says there is a mandatory detention, just like the Laken Riley Act has now ingrained in law, that's what we want. We want officials that will follow the law so that that doesn't happen again.
Esther, what more would you like to see President Trump do to crack down on illegal immigration? I'm just wondering from a state and local perspective, you don't want to create a bunch of Karens that turn people in for no reason. But if they have legitimate reason to believe that there's crime being committed and those people are illegal, is there a way that the federal authorities can work with the state and local authorities to provide a better sense of transparency to identify who is illegally here, specifically criminal illegal aliens?
Well, we have the supremacy clause to be able to redefine that, and we need to clamp down on the Trump administration to be able to enforce that with lawless sanctuary cities and say, we are not forced to obey you. You need to obey what the federal laws say. And the federal laws say that we have the authority and the jurisdiction and the domain to execute immigration laws and to enforce immigration laws. What I would like to see is the clearing of 3.7 million immigration cases in the current immigration court system. That's where I practice, so that the 15% of asylum seekers that have real cases are able to be heard and adjudicated within a year or two. There's no reason why an asylum case should take 5 to 7 years. The only reason that happens is because there's a clog of 3.7 million people who have no valid claims for asylum, being that they cannot prove that they're going to be tortured or persecuted on account of their race or religion if they're returned to their country of origin. That's what I would like to see. That's what Americans want to see.
All right, Esther, we really appreciate all of your insight on this today. Looking forward to speaking with you again about this. We know that President Trump is full steam ahead trying to fix our immigration system. Thank you again. Now, coming up, as Los Angeles County begins to rebuild from the devastating California fires, health experts are now sounding the alarm on a respiratory crisis caused by the flames. We'll discuss with Health Corps board member Christy Hutcherson after the break. Stay with us.